near Isarava, Kokoda Track, New Guinea, August 26, 1942, 14:17 hours. The jungle didn't just hide the enemy, it was the enemy. It was a living, breathing, suffocating thing. A green wall of aerial roots, decomposing leaves, and 300-foot-tall trees that blocked the sun, trapping the air in a humid 1,000-degree steam bath. And in that steam bath, things waited. Lieutenant Jack Jacko Riley, 39th Battalion, Militia, tasted the sweat and copper in his mouth. He wiped his palms on his drenched, rotting green uniform. His men, boys really from Melbourne and Sydney, too pale and too thin, moved behind him in single file. They didn't walk. They slid, grabbing one vine to stop from falling, then lurching forward to the next. The mud wasn't just on the ground, it was a vertical river. The only sound was their own ragged breathing and the drip, drip, drip of the canopy. Then, the sound that haunted their dreams. The insects stopped. A sudden absolute silence that ripped through the air. "Contact!" Jacko whispered, his voice cracking. He didn't even have to raise his hand. Every man froze, their hearts hammering against their ribs. They fumbled with the bolts of their long, heavy Lee Enfield SMLE rifles. Clack, clack. The sound was too loud. A single shot cracked from the left. Not a .303. It was a high-velocity 6.5mm Arisaka. It sounded like a whip striking dry leather. "Rory!" a man screamed. Private Rory Nabel, the point man, was gone. He hadn't fallen. He was simply absent from the space he'd occupied a second before, his rifle clattering onto the path. "Jap machine gun! Left flank! Hi!" another man yelled. Then the green wall exploded. It wasn't a banzai charge. That would come later. This was worse. This was a professional ice-cold ambush. A Nambu Type 96 light machine gun, the Woodpecker, opened up. Ta-ta-ta-ta, ta-ta-ta-ta. The sound was slow, methodical, calculated. Green tracers, bright as emeralds, zipped through the gloom, thudding into the trees and the mud. "Get down! Return fire!" Jacko roared, diving behind a log that was more fungus than wood. His men fumbled. Private Bluey Gibson, a farmer's son, raised his SMLE. It was nearly 5 feet long with its bayonet. He tried to pivot in the narrow track, but the barrel caught on a vine. He grunted. Trapped. Crack. A sniper. Bluey's helmet rang like a church bell and he collapsed, his body sliding 6 feet down the muddy incline. "Sir, we can't see him. We can't see him," a man sobbed, firing his rifle blindly into the foliage. Crack. A shot. Click, clack. The sound of a digger working his bolt. Crack. Another shot. Too slow. Each man in his platoon could fire at best 15 aimed rounds a minute, but they couldn't see their targets. They were just firing at noise. The Japanese, meanwhile, were invisible. They were small, wore green, and had been training for this environment for a decade. They were inside the Australians' perimeter before the Aussies even knew there was a perimeter. Jacko saw a flicker of movement, a flash of a canvas cap, a glint of a bayonet. "Contact front, 10 yards!" He raised his Webley pistol, a useless, tiny thing, and fired. The Japanese soldier, barely more than a boy, lunged from the ferns. He didn't fire his rifle. He ran straight at Jacko, his own bayonet fixed, a high, terrifying cry, "Ki-ai!" tearing from his throat. Jacko was paralyzed. This wasn't warfare. This was butchery. Whump. Corporal Davo Davidson, a giant of a man, slammed his rifle butt into the attacker's side, and the two men fell into the mud, rolling and stabbing. Jacko's platoon was disintegrating. They were riflemen, trained for open fields, for marksmanship. Here, in this green tunnel, their training was worthless. Their rifles were too long, their rate of fire too slow. They were being cut to pieces by an enemy they couldn't see, using tactics they couldn't counter. Fall back to the ridge!" Jacko screamed, grabbing a handful of a young private's shirt and pulling him to his feet. They ran, sliding and crashing through the undergrowth, leaving their dead where they lay. The sound of the woodpecker and the sharp crack of the Arisakas followed them all the way, laughing. That night, huddled under a leaking ground sheet, Jack O'Reilly stared into the darkness. They had lost 4 men in 30 seconds. 4 men who never even saw who shot them. He gripped the smooth wooden stock of his own SMLE. It was a beautiful weapon, accurate, reliable, proven on the fields of Gallipoli in France. And here, on this damned island, it was a coffin nail. The Kokoda track wasn't a track. It was a 96-kilometer scar of mud and misery, slashed through the spine of the Owen Stanley Range, connecting the northern coast of New Guinea to the vital Allied base at Port Moresby. If Moresby fell, Australia itself would be next. The Japanese, fresh from victories in Singapore and the Philippines, saw the track as a backdoor. The Australians, dismissed by the Japanese command as soft and lazy, were the only thing standing in the way. The problem was, the Australian soldiers on that track, primarily the 39th Battalion, were not the seasoned veterans of North Africa. They were Chacos, the chocolate soldiers. Young militia, undertrained, underfed, and catastrophically under-equipped. And they were fighting the terrain as much as the enemy. This was a vertical battlefield. Men climbed mountains so steep they had to cut steps into the mud. The rain was a solid gray curtain, falling for days, turning creeks into flash-flooding torrents that swept men and mules away. Dysentery, malaria, and jungle rot, a horrifying fungal infection that turned a man's skin into a raw, weeping wound, were rampant. But the tactical problem was the most immediate. The entire doctrine of the Australian Imperial Force, like the British Army it was modeled on, was built around the bolt-action rifle and the bayonet. In the open deserts of Libya, this made sense. A trained rifleman could hit a target at 500 yards. A mad minute of rapid aimed fire from a platoon of SMLEs could break a charge. And if the enemy got too close, the cold steel of a 17-inch bayonet was the decisive, terrifying solution. Here in the jungle, this doctrine was a death sentence. Visibility was often less than 20 yards. 20. The Japanese Imperial Army, however, had trained for this. They were masters of infiltration, camouflage, and the close fight. They didn't want to fight at 500 yards. They wanted to fight at 5 yards. They would let an Australian patrol pass, then open up from the rear and both flanks simultaneously. They tied their snipers into the canopy, wrapped in green, where they could remain for days. They used light, portable Type 89 knee mortars to drop explosives right into the Australian slit trenches. And when they charged to die. The Australian response was, by the book, to fix bayonets and meet them. But the SMLE, at 44.5 inches long, was already unwieldy. With a bayonet attached, it was a 5'7" pike. It was impossible to swing in the dense foliage, constantly snagging on wait-a-while vines. The diggers were fighting a 1917 war in a 1942 jungle. They needed volume of fire. They needed a weapon that could sweep the jungle, that could answer the ta-ta-ta of the Nambu with something other than the slow, deliberate crack, clack, crack of the Enfield. They had the Bren light machine gun, but it was heavy, hard to maneuver, and required a two-man team. They had the Thompson submachine gun in theory. But the early models were expensive, finicky, and few had made it to this secondary theater. The Japanese, meanwhile, advanced relentlessly. Ishirava, Eora Creek, Templeton's Crossing. Each name was another Australian defeat, another bloody withdrawal. The diggers were exhausted, starving, and haunted. They were being pushed back, step by muddy step, towards Moresby. Morale was on the brink of collapse. The men felt their equipment had failed them. They felt their doctrine had failed them. They needed something new. They needed it now, or there would be no Australia to defend. Consolidated Aid Post, Myola, September 1942. 03.20 hours. The smell was the first thing. A thick, sweet, metallic stench of blood, gangrene, and unwashed bodies, all overlaid with the sharp tang of iodine. Jack O'Reilly sat on an empty ammo crate, his head in his hands, trying not to listen to the sounds. A man 10 feet away was having his leg debrided of jungle rot with a rough brush, no anesthetic. His whimpers were rhythmic, like a broken animal. This was where failure lived. Myola was a small, flat clearing that served as a supply dump and field hospital. It was supposed to be a rear area, but in this war, there was no rear. Jacko's platoon had ceased to exist. After the ambush near Isurava, they had been merged with B Company, and the defeats had just kept coming. 2 days ago, Major Alistair Drummond, a man who still starched his collars in the jungle, had ordered a probing attack on a known Japanese position. "The banzai charge is a sign of desperation, gentlemen," Drummond had briefed them, his voice clipped and British-trained. "It's undisciplined. We will meet them with our discipline, aggressive marksmanship, volley fire. And when they break, the bayonet. Understood?" They had understood, and they had been slaughtered. The Japanese weren't undisciplined. They were dug in, with mutually supporting machine gun nests, hidden in bunkers made of coconut logs and earth that were invisible until you were 5 feet away. Jacko's men had advanced in good order. The Japanese had waited. The volley fire had splintered harmlessly against the logs. And when the order, "fix bayonets," was given, the Japanese had simply opened up with everything they had: the Nambu woodpeckers, the knee mortars, and rifle-launched grenades. It wasn't a fight. It was a harvest. Jacko had returned with 6 men from a platoon of 30. He had a shrapnel wound in his arm, a blighty, they called it, which was why he was here, waiting for a stitch-up. He watched a young private, his face the color of gray ash, get his dressings changed. His entire chest was a mass of small dark holes. A woodpecker wound. They just cut us down, sir," the private whispered to no one, his eyes vacant. We were still in formation. Like on the parade ground, they just cut us." The frustration in the ranks was curdling into a dark, bitter resentment, not just for the enemy, but for their own leadership, their own impossible situation. "It's the rifles, sir," a voice said next to him. Jacko looked up. It was Corporal Tom Sprocket Daly. He was a new arrival, a reinforcement from the 2st Battalion, a man with grease under his nails that no amount of jungle rain could wash away. He was a mechanic from Wagga Wagga. "The Enfields are fine rifles, sir," Daly said, keeping his voice low. "If you're shooting roos at 400 yards, but this ain't shooting. This is, I don't know. It's like trying to fight off a pack of dingoes with a cricket bat." He gestured with his chin to a group of officers arguing near the operations tent. Major Drummond was at the center, jabbing a finger at a map. "And they'll just tell us to do it again," Daly spat. "More aggressive marksmanship, more cold steel. They're getting us killed, sir, by the book." Jacko nodded, the exhaustion pressing down on him. The sickness, the hunger, the rain. They could bear all of that. What they couldn't bear was the futility. They couldn't bear dying for a tactic that didn't work, holding a weapon that couldn't save them. Failure wasn't a single event. It was this slow, cold rot, eating away at their hope, their bodies, and their will to fight. It was the sound of the Nambu. It was the sight of the empty beds in the aid post. And it was the growing certainty that unless something changed, none of them were ever going home. Jack O'Reilly wasn't an innovator. He was a listener. He was a 24-year-old former sheep station manager from Queensland. He understood shearing machines, water pumps, and how to fix a busted truck axle with fencing wire. He was practical, not brilliant, and right now, he was just a very tired lieutenant trying to keep his men alive. He was back with his newly reformed platoon, a grim collection of hollow-eyed survivors and green reinforcements, camped in a bog near Afoji. Corporal Sprocket Daly, the mechanic from Wagga, had been assigned to his section, and Daly, it turned out, was a scrounger. Afoji Village, Kokoda Track, September 4th, 1942, 21 hours. In the leaking tent that served as their platoon HQ, lit by a single sputtering fat lamp, Daly was laying out his treasures on a ground sheet. A box of captured Japanese biscuits, rock hard, a spool of telephone wire, 3 precious pineapple grenades, and something else. Something Jacko had never seen before. It looked like a piece of plumbing. It was short, made of rough, welded steel pipe, with a crude wooden stock that looked like it had been carved with a hatchet. It had 2 grips and a magazine that stuck straight up from the top of the receiver. "What in God's name is that, Corporal?" Jacko asked, nudging it with his boot. "This, sir?" Daly's eyes lit up, his usual cynical drawl replaced with genuine enthusiasm. "This is the digger's darling, or it will be. It's an Owen gun. Mark 1. "A what?" "An Owen. Invented by a bloke back home, Evelyn Owen. Army told him to shove off, said it looked like a toy, so he joined the AIF as a private and kept building them in his spare time. The brass still hated it, but the factory blokes, they loved it. Daly picked it up. It was small, compact. He held it like it was a holy relic. I acquired this one from a quartermaster's crate in Moresby. They've only made a few hundred. Most of the brass think they're gangster weapons. They prefer the Thompson, because it's American and expensive. This is made from scrap. Does it work? Jacko asked, skeptical. Work? Daly's grin was a flash of white in the gloom. Sir, it's a bloody miracle. Look, Daly field stripped the weapon in less than 30 seconds. He pulled the bolt out, which was protected by a simple receiver housing. See this? The Japs have their Type 100 submachine gun. The Germans have their MP40. They're all milled, complicated. This is stamped metal, and this is the genius part. He pointed to the top-mounted magazine. Gravity feed? Jacko guessed. Partly, but mostly it means the ejection port is on the bottom. You can drag this thing through a mile of mud, fire it, and the mud just falls out. You bury a Thompson in the dirt, you're dead. You bury this, it just keeps working. He held the simple bolt in his palm. It's got a firing pin built right in. No complex parts, it's just a heavy bit of steel. Simple, stupid simple. Jacko looked at the weapon, then at the long, elegant SMLE leaning against his pack. He remembered Bluey Gibson, tangled in the vines. He remembered the sound of the Nambu. Ta-ta-ta-ta. Then he looked at the Owen. It fires 9mm pistol rounds, sir, Daly said, as if reading his mind. Fast, about 700 rounds a minute. It's not accurate past 100 yards, but down here, you don't need 100 yards, Jacko said, his voice quiet. The spark had caught. It wasn't a rifle. It wasn't for marksmanship. It was a broom, a tool for sweeping the jungle, a weapon that could put 33 rounds into a 10-yard patch of ferns in less than 3 seconds. It was the answer to the Nambu. It was the cure for the ambush. It's an unapproved weapon, Daly, Jacko said, trying to sound official. Yes, sir, highly irregular. The Major will have our hides. He'll have 'em anyway, sir. Might as well have 'em for a good reason. Jacko picked up the Owen. It felt heavy, solid, and ugly. It felt right. How much ammunition did you acquire? Jacko asked. 3 full mags, sir. 99 rounds. Not enough. Not nearly enough, Jacko mused. But it's a start. He looked up at Daly, a new, hard light in his eyes. Get it clean, Corporal, and find me 2 more men who can keep their mouths shut. Battalion HQ, Minari, September 5th, 1942, 0730 hours. Major Alistair Drummond's headquarters was a large tent with a fly-proof mesh, a luxury that marked it as a place of importance. He was attempting to shave with a straight razor, using a small cracked mirror. Lieutenant Riley, you're recovering well, I see, Drummond said, his eyes cold in the mirror. He hadn't forgiven Jacko for the Blighty wound. To Drummond, being wounded was a form of poor administration. Sir, Jacko said, standing at what passed for attention in the mud, I need to requisition a different weapon for my point scouts. Requisition? Drummond scoffed, wiping a fleck of cream from his ear. We are not a department store, Riley. Your men are allocated 1 SMLE, Mach 30, per. They will maintain it. They will learn to use it. That is all. Sir, the SMLE is too long for the initial contact. By the time my point man brings his weapon to bear, the Jap has already fired. We are losing the first, most critical second of the fight. The first second is won by alertness, Lieutenant, by the bayonet spirit, by an aggressive posture. Sir, an aggressive posture doesn't stop a Nambu. Drummond turned, his face flushing dark red under the tropical pallor. Are you questioning my doctrine, Riley? I am questioning its effectiveness in this environment, sir. Jacko's heart was hammering, but he thought of Rory Nabel, of Bluey, of the whimpering men in the aid post. I have an alternative, a submachine gun, the Owen. Drummond laughed, a short, barking, joyless sound. The Owen? That plumber's nightmare? Good God, man. I've read the reports. It's a gangster weapon. It's inaccurate. It sprays bullets like a garden hose. It encourages moral panic and a waste of ammunition. It's exactly what we need, sir. Jacko pressed, his voice rising. The Japs aren't fighting a marksmanship contest. They're fighting with volume. They pin us, then they close. This spraying is how we stop them. It's how we pin them first. You are advocating for your men to Not aim. Drummond looked at him as if he were a heretic. I am advocating for my men to survive, sir. Give me one. Give me one Owen gun. Let me put it on point. Let me show you what it can do. Absolutely not, Drummond snapped. It is an unapproved firearm. It uses non-standard ammunition, a logistical nightmare, and it is, frankly, an unsoldierly weapon. We are riflemen, Mr. Riley. We are not Chicago hoodlums. Your job is to instill fire discipline in your men, not to equip them with toys. Am I clear? Your fire discipline is getting them killed, sir, Jacko said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The slap was fast. Drummond's signet ring caught Jacko on the cheek, splitting the skin. The tent was silent, save for the buzz of a fly. You are on report, Lieutenant, Drummond breathed, his face white with fury. You are insolent, you are defeatist, and you are relieved of your command. Get out of my sight. Go. Go check the ammunition stores at the dump. Count rounds. That seems to be your newfound expertise. Jacko's hand went to his cheek. He felt the warm blood. He looked at the major, a man trapped in a different century, a different war. He didn't say a word. He saluted, the gesture full of contempt. He turned, and he walked out. Corporal Daly, Jacko said, finding Sprocket by the latrines. Sir, the major was not receptive. Figured as much, sir. So we're on report. Worse, I've been relieved, reassigned to the ammo dump at Myola. He's trying to get rid of me. Daly chewed on a piece of grass. That's bad, sir. Real bad. But, Jacko said, a slow, wolfish grin spreading across his face, he's just sent me to the one place on this entire godforsaken track that might have more of these. Daly's eyes went wide. And more 9mm. We're not building a prototype, Daly, Jacko said, wiping the blood from his cheek. We're building an armory. Myola Supply Dump, September 8th, 1942, 02:12 hours. Myola wasn't a fortress. It was a cluster of tents and stacked crates in a sea of mud, guarded by a handful of quartermasters who were more concerned with tropical fungus ruining their boot leather than a determined scrounger. Jacko Riley, officially Lieutenant Admin J. Riley, was supposed to be counting 303 rounds. Instead, he was committing theft. He and Daly moved like shadows. The quartermaster sergeant was asleep in his tent, aided by a bottle of jungle juice, captured Japanese sake mixed with medical alcohol, that Daly had thoughtfully donated to him. This is it, sir, Daly whispered, prying the lid off a long wooden crate marked Ordnance, Sundry. It wasn't filled with sundries. It was filled with them. 5 brand new grease-covered Owen machine carbines. They were the Mark I, 1942 pattern. Slightly more refined than Daly's prototype, but still beautifully, brutally simple. Oh, you beautiful little bastards, Daly breathed, lifting one out. Get 'em, Jacko said. And the ammo. They found 4 crates of 9mm Parabellum, intended for a batch of high-command Thompson guns that had never made it off the ships in Moresby. They didn't just take the guns. They took spare magazines, cleaning kits, and springs. They moved all 6 guns, Daly's original plus the 5 new ones, and 8,000 rounds of ammunition to a condemned tent at the edge of the clearing, one that was supposedly filled with rotting sandbags. For the next 48 hours they worked. This wasn't just about building a weapon, it was about building a system. The first problem was the sound. The Owen was loud, a distinctive high-pitched brr-t. In the jungle, that was a shoot me sign. We can't make it quieter, Daly said, stripping a bolt and wiping it down with rifle oil. But we can make it ours. The second problem was the look. The guns were factory-blued steel. They shined in the wet. We need camo, Jacko said. Daly looked around. He grabbed a roll of Hessian burlap from a sandbag. He took the pot of green-black fungicide used to treat tents, and he found a can of brown paint. They worked by the light of a stolen hurricane lamp. The air was thick with the smell of oil, paint, and mold. They wrapped the stocks and grips in strips of the Hessian, breaking up the silhouette. Then, they painted them. They didn't just paint them green. Daly, the mechanic, had an artist's eye. He used a splatter technique, dipping a brush in the brown and green and flicking it, creating a mottled pattern that perfectly matched the jungle floor. No shine, Daly muttered, admiring his work. Then came the prototype part. Jacko wasn't just arming 6 men, he was creating a new tactical unit. He requisitioned, from the discarded pile, 6 men who were at Miola for minor wounds or exhaustion. Men he knew, men from his old platoon. "Bluey, you're not on the Enfield anymore. You're on this," Jacko said, handing the camouflaged Owen to the young private. "Sir? What is it?" "It's your new job," Jacko said. "It's called the Point Man. You, me, and Daly. We're going to practice." For 2 days, in a gully far from the camp, they practiced. They didn't practice marksmanship. They practiced reaction. Jacko would stand 50 yards away in the thick jungle and blow a whistle. The squad, Daly, Bluey, and 3 other men, would have to react. The first few times were a mess. They fumbled, got in each other's way. "No!" Jacko yelled. "Don't aim! Point! It's a shotgun! You're pointing! Daly, you take left. Bluey, you take right. 1 burst 1, 3-round burst, sweep it, then move. Don't wait for the return fire, move." They learned. They learned to fire from the hip. They learned to walk while firing, a stream of lead hosing the jungle in front of them. The sound was terrifying. Brr-tee, brr-tee, brr-tee. It echoed off the hills. It was a sound of pure, concentrated aggression. "Sir," Daly said on the 3rd night, holding a warm-barreled Owen, "this ain't a prototype anymore. This is a platoon." Jacko nodded. They had 6 guns, camouflaged and silenced, metaphorically, by their new tactics. They had men who knew how to use them. "Now," Jacko said, "we just need a fight." "Major Drummond is at Yoribaiwa," Daly said, tapping a map. "He's planning another aggressive patrol. Seems he's walking right into a Japanese blocking force." "Good," Jacko said, his voice cold. "He'll need a rescue. And we're just the insubordinate, gangster weapon-toting bastards to do it." Yoribaiwa Ridge, September 11, 1942, 1540 hours. The test was not controlled. It was not a demonstration. It was a baptism by fire, forced by the very man who had rejected the idea. Major Drummond's probing attack had gone exactly as Jacko had predicted. It had been a disaster. Drummond, leading A Company, had advanced directly into a prepared Japanese kill zone. Now they were pinned, cut off, and being systematically dismantled by mortars and machine guns. The radio static at the brigade HQ tent was a frantic buzz of panic. "Cannot advance. Heavy resistance. Nambu nests on both flanks. Request immediate." Ksht! Jack O'Reilly stood outside the tent. He was supposed to be guarding supplies. He was filthy, his cheek a purple-green-black bruise. He and his rogue platoon of 6 Owen gunners had marched all night from Miola, escorting a supply mule that didn't exist. "Sir," Jacko said, stepping into the tent. The brigade's CO, a haggard colonel, looked up. "Riley, what in blazes are you doing here? You're supposed to be at Miola." "Major Drummond is my CO, sir. His men are trapped. I know that ground, and I have a solution." "A solution? I'm listening." "Sir, the Japs are hugging his flanks. They're using the jungle. They're too close for mortars, and the Vickers guns can't see them. We can't get to them with rifles." "Your point, Lieutenant?" "My men, my section, are not riflemen, sir. We are contact men. We can get in close. We can break those nests. Give me 20 minutes. The colonel looked at Jacko. He looked at the map, covered in red, all of it bad. He looked at the radio, which had gone silent. "You're a disgrace, Riley. You know that? You've disobeyed a direct order. You've stolen government property. You're probably facing a court-martial." "Yes, sir." "Fine. Go. You have 20 minutes. If you're not back, I'll assume you're a hero. If you are back, I'll decide what to do with you then." "Thank you, sir." Jacko turned. "Daly, Bluey, on me. We're going left flank, the rest with me. We are the aggressive patrol. Move." They didn't run. They flowed. They moved in a staggered file, 10 yards apart. Not on the track, but in the jungle, parallel to it. They were 6 men, armed with painted burlap-wrapped nightmares. They smelled the fight before they heard it. Cordite, blood, and the sharp, acidic tang of Japanese cooking. They heard the Nambu, ta-ta-ta-ta. It was 50 yards ahead to their left, firing down the slope at Drummond's trapped company. "Daly," Jacko whispered on the hand signal. You see it? Daly pointed. A patch of ferns that was too dark. A glint of a tripod leg. Bluey, you're on suppression. The rest, on me, on my whistle. 3-round bursts, sweep and move. Jacko put the whistle to his lips. He took a breath. He looked at his men. Their eyes were wide, but not with fear, with anticipation. He blew. Beat! Bluey stepped from behind a tree. He didn't aim. He raised the Owen to his hip and squeezed the trigger. Bert! The sound was deafening. It was utterly alien. It wasn't the slow crack of the SMLE or the ta-ta-ta of the Nambu. It was a roar, a chainsaw tearing through steel. The 9mm rounds, 33 of them, ripped through the ferns. Leaves, branches, and red-black mist exploded from the dark patch. The Nambu fired one last wild burst into the sky and then stopped. Move! Jacko roared. The 6 men advanced. Bert! Daly fired into a bush. Bert! Another man hosed down a banyan tree. They weren't shooting at targets. They were erasing the landscape. They were mowing the lawn, as Daly put it. A Japanese soldier, his face a mask of shock, jumped up from a foxhole, his rifle in his hand. Jacko didn't even think. He just pointed his own Owen and fired. Bert! The man was simply removed. They reached the crest of the ridge. Below them, they saw Drummond and his men, huddled behind logs. Cease fire! Cease fire! Jacko yelled. The silence was sudden and shocking. The only sound was the click, click, click of hot metal cooling. A figure stood up from behind a log, Major Drummond. His uniform was torn, his face black with powder. He stared at Jacko and his 5 men standing on the ridge, smoke coiling from the barrels of their strange painted guns. Riley, Drummond whispered, his voice hoarse. Sir, Jacko said, slamming a fresh top-mounted magazine into his Owen. Patrol's over. The first test had been a success, a shocking, violent proof of concept, but it was a rescue, not a battle. The real trial would come 2 days later, when the Owen squad was no longer a rogue element, but the designated tip of the spear. Yorubaiwa Ridge, September 13th, 1942, 05:10 hours. The Japanese, enraged by the loss of their blocking position, were counterattacking. They were coming in force, at dawn, using their classic tactic. A series of softening mortar attacks followed by a wave of bayonets. Jacko's 6-man squad was no longer his. The colonel, a convert, had taken them and distributed them. One of your men, and one of these things, in every platoon, the colonel had ordered. They are your contact men. The rest of the platoon supports them. Not the other way around. This is a new doctrine. Write it down, Jacko. Jacko, Daly, and Bluey were now advisors, moving between the foxholes of A Company as the pre-dawn mist swirled around their knees. The air was damp and cold. The men were quiet, their knuckles white on their SMLEs. Remember, Jacko said, his voice low and calm as he knelt by a 19-year-old private with a new Owen. You are not a rifleman. You're a fireman. You see the fire, the Nambu, you point, and you put it out. 3 seconds. That's all I want. 3 seconds. Then get your head down and change mags. Yes, sir. The private, a boy named Harris, whispered, his teeth chattering. Thwump, thwump, thwump. The sound they all dreaded, the Japanese knee mortars. Here they come, Daly muttered, chambering around. The mortar shells walked up the hill. Crump, crump. Earth, mud, and shrapnel filled the air. Men screamed. Then, the whistles. Banzai! The cry came from 100 throats at once. A wave of Japanese soldiers, bayonets glinting in the gray light, surged out of the jungle, straight up the hill. Hold! Hold! Major Drummond roared. He was in the central foxhole. Now, Harris! Jacko yelled. Now, give it to him! Private Harris stood up. He was shaking. He saw the wave of men. He raised his SMLE, the old ingrained reflex. No! The Owen! Jacko screamed, grabbing the boy's shoulder. Harris dropped his rifle, grabbed the Owen, and, without aiming, squeezed the trigger. Bert! He held it down. The entire 33-round magazine emptied in a single, sustained, deafening roar. The weapon bucked in his hands, but he held it. The effect was apocalyptic. The stream of 9mm rounds, arcing slightly, hit the charging line like a scythe. It didn't just hit one man, it hit 5. The bullets, not powerful enough to pass through, simply tore into the attackers. The front line of the charge didn't just fall, it disintegrated. "Next!" Daly yelled. Another Owen opened up from the right flank. Burt, burt, burt. The Japanese, who had expected to meet slow-firing rifles and men fumbling with bolts, faltered. They had run into a wall of lead. "Riflemen, fire at will!" Drummond shouted, his voice alive with a new, savage energy. Now the SMLEs joined in. Crack, crack, crack. But they weren't firing in a panic. They were firing at the survivors, the ones the Owens had missed. The Japanese charge broke. They hadn't even reached the wire. They turned and fled back into the jungle, leaving a horrific number of their dead on the slope. The silence that fell was more profound than the noise had been. A single Australian digger stood up, his SMLE in his hand, and screamed at the top of his lungs, "How do you like that, you bastards?" Jack O'Reilly leaned against the muddy wall of the trench, his legs shaking. He watched Private Harris, who was staring, wide-eyed, at the empty Owen in his hands, a wisp of smoke curling from the barrel. "Reload, Private," Jacko said, his voice gentle. "They'll be back." But he knew. It was over. The spell was broken. The psychological terror of the Banzai charge had been met by a new, more terrible sound. The sound of the Owen gun. The story of the Yorubaiwa Ridge fight traveled up and down the Kokoda track faster than a runner. It wasn't just a military victory, it was a psychological one. Soldiers who for weeks had felt hopelessly outgunned now had a new legend. They had a digger's darling. They had a weapon that worked. The dominoes fell, slowly at first, then all at once. Port Moresby, General Blamey's HQ, September 20th, 1942, 11 hours. Major Drummond, clean and starched once more, stood before a panel of grim-faced officers. General Blamey himself was there, listening. "And you are telling me, Major," Blamey said, his voice like gravel, "that this pop gun, which the Ordnance Board has repeatedly rejected as unfit for service, is the reason you are still holding Yorubaiwa?" "Sir," Drummond said, his voice clear and firm, "I was wrong. I was a by-the-book officer. That book is obsolete. The Owen gun, in the hands of a trained Australian soldier, is the single most effective jungle warfare weapon I have ever witnessed. It is not a gangster weapon. It is a counter-ambush weapon. It gives the initiative back to our men." He paused and then added, "Lieutenant Riley, who I had foolishly disciplined, was the first to realize it. He and his men developed the doctrine on their own that saved my company. I recommend him for an immediate military cross." The impact was seismic. Fictional report, internal memo, AIF HQ, New Guinea. From Major General A.V. Untubi. Allen, to GHQ. Subject, urgent, ordnance request. The tactical situation on the track has confirmed the unsuitability of standard rifle section doctrine. Field reports from the 39th and 21st Battalions confirm that the Owen machine carbine, 9mm, is spectacularly effective in close-quarter jungle contact. All available stocks of this weapon are to be flown to Moresby immediately. All. I don't care if they are unsighted or unblued. Send them. We require 500 units by end of week. We require 10,000 units by end of month. The production of the short-range rifle is no longer a secondary concern. It is the primary factor for success in this theater. The digger's darling was born. The Australian government, which had been hemming and hawing, suddenly threw its entire weight behind the Lysot factory, which was producing the Owen. The weapon, once a tinkerer's dream, was now the official priority. Jack O'Reilly, meanwhile, was promoted to captain and pulled from the front line. He was now Captain Riley, Jungle Tactics, Owen, and his job was to train everyone. He and Daly, now Sergeant Daly, found themselves on a firing range outside Moresby, teaching green reinforcements how to mow the lawn. "Forget your 300-yard targets," Jacko would yell, walking down the line. "Your target is a bush. It's a shadow. It's the sound of a twig snapping. I want you to point, not aim. I want you to make that patch of jungle unlivable." The Owen gun, with its distinctive top-mounted magazine and rough-and-ready build, became a symbol. The Americans, with their beautifully milled Thompsons, would scoff until they saw what the mud-caked Owen could do. It spread. Soon, every Australian platoon in the Pacific had one, then three, then five. It was no longer an innovation. It was the standard. And it was the weapon that would help the Australians, finally, push the Japanese off the track and back to the sea. The Owen gun, as designed by Evelyn Owen, was a masterpiece of simplicity. The Owen gun, as used by the Australian digger, was a canvas for battlefield art. Once the weapon flowed to the front lines, the troops immediately began to improve it. On the track near Oivi, October 28, 1942, 13:15 hours. "See, sir," Sergeant Daly, now permanently attached to Jacko's training cadre, explained to a visiting American officer, "The factory issue is good, but the boys, they make it better." He held up two Owens. One was standard, the other was a digger's special. "First," Daly said, "the stock. It's wood, it's heavy, and it rots. The boys at the 2-3rd, they liberated a wrecked Jeep. Cut the steering wheel up, welded a pistol grip on. Lighter, better. Other units, less mechanically inclined, simply sawed the stock off entirely, creating a bush pistol that was pure, unadulterated close-quarters terror. Second, the camo," Daly continued. The mottled green and brown paint Jacko and Daly had pioneered was now standard, but troops added their own flair. They wrapped the barrels in Hessian strips, not just for camouflage, but to create a heat guard to grip after a long firefight. They tied strips of their own rotting green uniforms to it, letting them dangle to break up the shape. But the real mod, Daly said, is the fast mag system. A standard Owen carried 33 rounds. A firefight lasted seconds. Reloading was life or death. A bloke from C Company. He taped two magazines together. Daly grinned. Upside down, one in the gun, one pointing at the dirt. "You empty? You don't go for your pouch. You just flip it. Pop, flip, click. Back in the fight in 2 seconds." This simple field-expedient trick, jungle-style magazines, would be copied by soldiers all over the world for the next 70 years. The Japanese, for their part, learned quickly. They were not stupid. At first, the brarty of the Owen had been a terrifying shock. Now, it was a priority target. Japanese snipers, once tasked with hitting officers, and Bren gunners were retrained. "Shoot the pipe gun" was the new order. The sound of an Owen meant a point man. Kill the point man, and the hesitant, rifle-armed platoon behind him was vulnerable. They also began to counter the tactic itself. If the Australians were mowing the lawn, the Japanese would go to ground. They stopped charging en masse into the wall of lead. Instead, they would initiate contact, take the first burst from the Owen on their fortified log bunkers, and then wait. They waited for the distinctive click of the empty bolt. "They're counting, sir," Daly reported to Jacko, his face grim. "They know it's 33 rounds. They know it takes us 2 seconds to reload. They're timing their own charge to that 2-second gap." The cat-and-mouse game evolved. The Japanese would use knee mortars to suppress the Owen gunner, forcing him to keep his head down, while their riflemen moved to flank him. The war adapted. The Owen was no longer a magic wand, it was a tool, and the enemy was learning how to fight the tool. The diggers in turn had to learn again. They stopped using one Owen gunner. They started using two. "You're a team," Jacko drilled his new recruits. "Harris, you fire. Bluey, you cover his reload. One of you is always shooting. Never ever let that sound stop." The jungle, which had been silent, then punctuated by the slow crack of rifles, was now a constant, terrifying duet of brrrt, reload, brrrt, reload, the sound of the new warfare. The Owen gun changed the war. But the war, in turn, changed the men who used it. Forward Aid Station, Gona, December 5th, 1942, 18 man-hours. The Kokoda Track campaign was over. The Australians, having pushed the Japanese back over the mountains, were now facing their most brutal fight, the beachhead battles at Buna, Gona, and Sanananda. This wasn't jungle. This was a meat grinder, a flat, sweltering, swampy plain of coconut plantations and concrete bunkers. And here, the unintended cost of the Owen gun became terrifyingly clear. Ammunition. An SMLE rifleman, in a day-long fight, might fire 50 rounds. He could carry 100 rounds easily. An Owen gunner, in a 30-second contact, would fire 100 rounds. Captain Jack O'Reilly, now attached to the 21st Brigade, found himself in a logistical nightmare. "I can't feed these guns, sir." A quartermaster sergeant screamed at him, his face purple. "My mules are dropping dead." "My native carriers, the Fuzzy Wuzzy Angels, they can't do it. One box of 303 is 1,000 rounds. One box of 9mm is 1,000 rounds. The 303 box supplies 20 men for a day. The 9mm box supplies one Owen gunner for 10 minutes. The new doctrine was hungry. It devoured 9mm ammunition at a rate the supply chain, which was still built for a bolt-action army, simply could not handle. This led to new, terrible choices. Jacko sat in on a debrief. A young lieutenant, his eyes dead, described a failed attack on a bunker. "We had them pinned," the lieutenant said, his voice monotone. "Private Harris, he was on the Owen. He was doing beautiful work, just sweeping the firing slit. The Japs couldn't even look at us. We were halfway across the clearing." He stopped. "What happened, son?" the colonel asked. He ran out. The click. We all heard it. He was fumbling for a new mag, and the Nambu opened up. We lost 7 men. In the 10 seconds it took him to reload, he ran dry. The reliance on the Owen was so total that when it stopped, the platoon's backbone was gone. The riflemen, now relegated to a support role, had forgotten how to fight on their own. Jacko felt a cold stone in his stomach. His solution had created a new fatal dependency. There was a moral cost, too. Jacko visited Private Harris in the aid station. He hadn't been hit. He was shell-shocked, or as they called it, battle-exhausted. He was sitting on a cot, rocking back and forth, cleaning his Owen gun. He had already cleaned it 6 times. "Harris?" Jacko said. Harris looked up. His eyes were not vacant. They were full of something horrifying. "It's so easy, sir," Harris whispered, his hands polishing the barrel. "With the SML, you see the man. You aim. You make a choice. You pull the trigger. It's personal." He looked at the Owen in his lap. "With this, I don't even see them, sir. I see the ferns shake, and I erase it. I just pull the trigger and erase. I don't know how many." He looked at his hands, which were raw from the cleaning brush. "What kind of man does that make me, sir, when it's this easy?" Jacko had no answer. He had armed his men with a weapon to survive the jungle. He hadn't realized until this moment that the weapon would bring the jungle home with them. It was a tool of impersonal destruction, and it was hollowing out the men who used it. The digger's darling demanded a high price, not just in bullets, but in souls. Sanananda Point, January 22nd, 1943, 14:00 hours. The battle was over. The last Japanese stronghold had fallen. Captain Jack O'Reilly stood on the beach. The stench of death, of rotting bunkers and polluted swamps, was overwhelming. But for the first time in 6 months, there was no gunfire. The campaign had been won. It had been won by Chacos and AIF veterans, by American air support, by superhuman endurance, and by the Fuzzy Wuzzy Angels. And it had been won, in no small part, by the pipe gun. In the final brutal bunker-to-bunker fighting, the Owen gun had been the key. The tactics had evolved to their final savage form. A bunker-busting team. A Bren gunner to provide suppression. A bomber with grenades. And an Owen gunner who would creep up to the firing slit of a Japanese concrete pillbox and post a letter. He would jam the barrel of the Owen into the slit and hold the trigger down, emptying the entire 33-round magazine into the enclosed space. The 9mm rounds, ricocheting inside the concrete box, were devastating. It was a horrific, bloody, and messy way to fight. And it was the only way that worked. Jacko watched as a group of exhausted, stick-thin, jungle rot-covered diggers, the victors, walked past him, heading for a delousing station. Almost every man had an Owen slung over his shoulder. It was no longer a special weapon. It was the Australian infantryman's weapon. Major Drummond found him on the beach. The major was thinner, grayer, but he was alive. "Riley," he said, holding out a hand. Jacko took it. "It's over." "Yes, sir. GHQ wants a full report. Lessons learned." "On your desk," they said. "Sir, I'm a field officer." "You were, Captain," Drummond said. "Now you're a bloody legend. Your jungle sweeper idea. It's not just for New Guinea. They're sending your training manual to the Americans in the Solomons. They're using it in Burma. You and that mechanic, you didn't just save a platoon, you wrote the book." A week later, Jacko was at a small, formal ceremony at Government House in Port Moresby. For conspicuous gallantry and leadership on Ioribiwa Ridge, for developing new and effective jungle warfare tactics under extreme duress, His Majesty is pleased to award the Military Cross to Captain Jack Riley. Sergeant Tom Sprocket Daly was awarded the Military Medal. As the medal was pinned to his chest, Jacko didn't feel pride. He just felt heavy. He thought of Private Harris, who was on a ship home, medically unfit. He thought of the quartermaster who had screamed about bullets. He thought of the sheer, bloody waste of it all. The Owen gun had given them the ability to win, but the cost of winning had been staggering. The immediate legacy was clear. The Australian Army, from 1943 onward, was arguably the most effective jungle fighting force in the world. Their doctrine, built on the firepower of the Owen, the Bren, and the grenade, was ruthless and efficient. The weapon would go on to serve in Korea, Malaya, and even the early days of Vietnam. It was the rifle that had truly changed Australian warfare. It had turned an army of marksmen into an army of close-quarter contact fighters. Toowoomba, Queensland, Australia. May 17, 1978, 10:30 hours. The man who opened the farmhouse door was old. His knuckles were thick with arthritis, his face a road map of sun-scorched wrinkles. He wore a faded flannel shirt and work pants. A young historian from the Australian War Memorial, all eager eyes and a cassette recorder, stood on the porch. "Mr. Riley, Mr. Jack Riley. Been a while since anyone called me that," the old man said, his voice a low Queensland rumble. "Come in. Wife's got tea on." The farmhouse was quiet. On the mantel, next to photos of grandchildren, sat two objects: a tarnished silver cup from a pre-war sheepdog trial, and a small, faded, purple and white ribbon mounted in a cheap frame, the Military Cross. There was no gun. "So," Jacko said, sipping his tea, "you want to talk about the Digger's Darling?" "It's a forgotten story in many ways, sir," the historian said, switching on the recorder. "People know the gun, but they don't know how it came to be used. They don't know you, or Sergeant Daly." "Sprocket," Jacko said, a small smile touching his lips. He bought a garage in Wagga after the war. Did well, passed on, 68, busted ticker. They say you invented modern jungle warfare, sir." Jacko looked out the window at the vast, open, golden fields of wheat, the exact opposite of New Guinea. "I didn't invent anything, son," he said, his voice quiet. "I just listened. The jungle told us what it wanted. The Japs told us what we were doing wrong, and that thing was the only answer that made sense. I was the first one to stop reading the bloody book. But the tactics, the point sweep, desperation," Jacko said, cutting him off. "It wasn't tactics, it was desperation. It was the sound of my men getting cut down in the dark. That's all. We found a way to make a louder noise." The historian paused. "Some reports, Major Drummond's, specifically, call it a war-winning innovation." Jacko was silent for a long time. He stared into his tea. "You know what I remember?" he said, his voice thick. "I remember a boy named Harris from," he waved his hand, "somewhere. Adelaide, maybe. I gave him that gun. I taught him how to erase, how to mow the lawn. I visited him after, in the psych ward. He couldn't hold his own baby. His hands, they shook. Too much. He said he was too easy to pull the trigger. The gun," Jacko said, his gaze distant. "It worked. It did the job. We went into that jungle as riflemen, marksmen. We came out of it as something else. Something harder. Something that could post letters in a bunker. It changed Australian warfare, sir." "Yes," Jacko said. He stood up, his knees cracking, and walked to the window. He looked out at the peaceful, sunlit land he had fought for. It did. It saved us, and it cost us. It saved our country, but it cost us, well, it cost us us. It was the right tool, son, for the worst bloody job on earth. And I thank God every day that I never ever had to pick one up again. The historian sat in the silence, the only sound the whirring of the cassette recorder, capturing the long, heavy echo of the rifle that had changed everything.